Amendment A080172, House Bill 1507.
Wait, I'm confused. There's been a motion and a second on the amendment.
Yes.
Okay, and a call for discussion.
Right now, you're discussing it.
Okay, I just want to make sure this is the opportunity for members to discuss this.
That's why I recognize you.
Okay.
You are in order to discuss, Representative Vitale.
I don't have anything to say.
All right. Thank you, Representative Vitale. Representative Cohen?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, we're all seeing this for the first time. Mr. Everett, will you please explain what this amendment does?
We just had it explained by our executive director, but we could explain it again.
I'd like to know specifically, does this broaden the coverage from the original amendment? Does it include more expenditures? Does it include more organizations?
It, from my perspective of the amendment, from working with the sponsor of the amendment and with the executive director, it clarifies what was to be covered in the bill and ensures that that we're stopping the collection of union dues, PAC dues, but that there would be a continuation of forwarding on to the unions the fair share fees that are paid by non-union members. And there was some clarifying language. Susan, you have anything to add to that?
Okay, and the language of on number 20 about get out the vote drives, and
we thought that it would be.
This is new language, I guess.
Well, we tried to cross-reference over to the election code and what's considered a political contribution, and then we borrowed some of the language from the current bill, political contributions, just so it was more in line with the current law.
Okay. Well, I would think this probably does clarify it, but I think it broadens it and creates a greater bans on greater obstacles on unions' ability to spend money. So I will be voting against it.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Representative Cohen. Any other member?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Vitale.
Yeah, I'm going to make a motion to table this, and I'll state my reasons once at the appropriate time.
Is there a second? Second. What are you making a motion to table, Representative Vitale?
You know, we came in here voting.
No, Representative Vitale, what exactly are you moving to table? What's
both the bill and the amendment for a motion moving to table both the bill and the amendment.
All right. Your comments on your motion?
Okay. This is a very controversial bill, and it's an amendment that we are just seeing for the first time. It's highly inappropriate, for this hearing to be conducted the way it called as it was, a highly controversial bill like this being called off the floor without the opportunity of any sort of notice, and the springing upon us of new language like this. You know, our representative democracy, you know, requires that the public also be engaged in this process, and the public also have the opportunity to give us input on the things we are voting on. That would be denied unless this motion for tabling was granted. This amendment, the language of the amendment, has subtleties which, frankly, need a trained eye to really appreciate the full impact of, and that is not going to happen right now if we vote on this now. If we do in fact table this, we can at least go back to those stakeholders, potential stakeholders who might be affected by this, and also appreciate some of the nuances of what we're voting on. Also, a motion to table both the bill and the amendment might give other members, given this new language, the opportunity to tweak it further by other amendments. So I think that to ram it through right now without any notice and with new language would be really forcing us to vote semi-blindly and really be cutting the public out of the process. So for that reason, I move to table.
Thank you, Representative Vitale. And we did, this legislation has been discussed from both sides for quite some time now. There was a rally at the Capitol by the unions earlier this year against it. We had a hearing recently for it. There was a rally here at the Capitol recently for it. I know I've been receiving contacts from the public on this for quite some time now. There's actually ads running out in western Pennsylvania advocating for this type of legislation. There's been mailings that have been arriving in people's homes across the Commonwealth for probably the last couple of months now related to this legislation. So I think the public is more engaged on this piece of legislation than most of the legislation that we've been engaged on this session.
To be clear, the date on this amendment is June 23rd.
Representative Vitale, you're not.
Today is
Representative
June
Vitale, you're not in order. You were already recognized. You're not recognized now. But now I'm going to recognize Representative Everett on his. Representative Vitale. Representative Vitale.
Yeah.
Please wait until you're recognized.
Okay.
Representative Everett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just, this amendment is almost technical in nature. It adds a few references to the election code. It makes it clear that the bill and the amendment only apply to contracts that are entered into after the effective date, and it takes out the fair share part that should not have been in the legislation in the first place. So there's nothing radical here. It's almost, like I said, technical in nature, and I don't think that it's controversial or any reason that it can't be heard today.
Thank you, Representative Everett.
That's their opinion. We've had.
I do.
Representative Vitale, you are now recognized once again.
Again, I want to underscore the fact that if you look at the top of the Everett Amendment, you'll see that the date it came down from Legislative Reference Bureau was June 23rd, which is today's date. So this is new language. I don't think, and it is, there are nuances to language. Sometimes even the changing of a single word or phrase really has an impact upon a group of citizens or even a large segment of Pennsylvania. And so I don't think that, and to be clear, Garth Everett is a friend, and I certainly trust him. But to be clear, I don't think that we should take the characterization of any one rep as to something is semi-technical in nature. We need to really have the opportunity to take a look at this language, see what the true import is, discuss this with our experts, so we can make an intelligent vote on this. I think it's frankly appalling that we get a controversial vote meeting called off the floor and be asked to vote on an amendment that came down sometime today. This is representative democracy at its worst, and I just do not think this is appropriate.
Thank you, Representative Vitale. Once again, I think this is representative. This is a representative constitutional republic at its best, in that we've had input from the public for many months now on this issue from both sides. We had a hearing. We've taken information from that hearing, crafted it into, as Representative Everett portrayed it, basically a more technical type of amendment. I mean, there's some changes, minor changes, but to clarify, to make it better per the testimony that we received. But on an issue as important as this, that might be very controversial, but as a matter of right versus wrong, I think today is the day we should be doing it. And the budget time being at hand, we have a limited number of days to make things happen over the course of the next week or so, whenever we're going to wrap up the budget. Representative O'Brien, I was missing your input.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On might and right, I'd be happy to debate and discuss the Peloponnesian Wars with you all day. But nonetheless, the question before this committee is a question of tabling. That's the question before us.
So on the question,
Now, this amendment came down today. It's hot off the presses. One needs asbestos to touch the page.
not hot anymore.
And let's face facts, Mr. Chairman, the ultimate and end vote on this, it's a kabuki dance. It's a kabuki dance. It's highly orchestrated, and we know exactly what will happen. But nonetheless, to maintain an appearance of propriety, we should table, we should give the members at least a few hours to review it. That is the core of a constitutional democratic republic. I move once again to table.
Thank you, Representative O'Brien. Any other member? Representative Daly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to add my voice to those who are asking for this, the bill and the amendment to be tabled. Just reading through it this quickly, I want to be sure that I understand the whole thing and have an opportunity to ask questions about it. And I don't think we have that time. I raced over here because I also had a health committee meeting at the same time. And quite honestly, I just feel like I would join my colleagues who are asking for tabling it with the idea that we need time to look at it. I'm not opposed to voting on it. I just believe that tabling it would give us adequate chance to have time to take a look at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Daly. We've had a motion to table that was seconded. If I could ask the Member Secretary, Representative McGinnis, to call the roll on the motion to table the bill.
Motion to table, Chair Metcalfe.
No.
Barar. Dunbar. No. Ivankovich. Everett. No. Gobbler. No. Keller. No. Knowles. No. Krieger. No. Maloney. No. McGinnis, no. Roy. No. Saccone. No. Simmons.
No.
Truitt.
No.
Chair Cohn.
Yes.
Daly.
Yes.
Flynn. Harris.
Yes.
McNeil.
Yes.
Miller.
Yes.
O'Brien.
Yes.
Schlossberg.
Yes.
Sims. Vitale.
Yes.
Chair Metcalfe, a majority answering negative, the motion fails.
Thank you, Representative McGinnis. We've had discussion and we had a motion and a second to move the amendment, to adopt the amendment. Representative McGinnis, if you can call the roll on the amendment.
Mr. Chairman, on the amendment.
Representative
On the
McGinnis,
bill,
prior
on the
to,
bill, Mr. Chairman.
well, we're not on the bill yet. We're going to deal with the amendment and then the bill?
Okay.
Okay. Representative McGinnis, could you take the roll call on the amendment, please?
Chair Metcalfe.
Yes.
Barar. Dunbar.
Yes.
Ivankovich.
Yes.
Everett.
Yes.
Gobbler.
Yes.
Keller.
Yes.
Knowles.
Yes.
Krieger.
Yes.
Maloney. McGinnis, yes. Roy.
Yes.
Saccone.
Yes.
Simmons.
Yes.
Truitt.
Yes.
Chair Cohn.
No.
Daly.
No.
Flynn.
No.
Harris.
No.
McNeil.
No.
Miller.
No.
O'Brien.
No.
Schlossberg. Sims. Vitale.
No.
Chair Metcalfe, a majority in favor. The motion carries.
Thank you, Representative McGinnis. We now have House Bill 1507 as amended by Amendment A08017. That's been adopted, the Harvard Amendment. Discussion on the bill. Seeing no discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Cohen.
Thank you. First, I note with interest that this exempts police and firemen from these provisions. I am happy that they are exempted. I wonder why there are not broader exemptions. This is, if you can see that some unions are not exempted, I don't really see what the distinction is in terms of union dues.
Representative Cohen, was that a rhetorical, or would you like me to answer that?
I'd welcome an answer.
Well, the unions that are exempted are the ones that are subject to binding arbitration.
So the rationale is the purpose of this is to influence unions that have the right to strike.
The purpose of this is to ensure that we stop the unions from utilizing taxpayer resources to advance their own political purposes. The other unions are subject to other sections of the law. They're under binding arbitration, and that was the main reason that they're not being included.
Okay, well, I welcome some unions not being included. I would even welcome even more if many more unions could not be included, or this legislation would not come up. This legislation makes it more difficult for those workers who are covered and for their unions to support the organizations to protect their jobs, their wages, their benefits, and their workplace rights. This legislation would interfere with the workplace rights of workers by making it illegal for those workers to agree to have their union fees voluntarily deducted from their paychecks. This is a restriction the state does not place on any other kind of payroll deduction. This legislation is not about protecting workers, it's not about protecting taxpayers, and it's not about good government. Public workers under current law without this legislation cannot be forced to join a union or to contribute to a union. Every public worker in Pennsylvania has the right not to join a union. Workers who are not members of a union do not pay full union dues. Second, unions do not dictate the amount of their dues and do not compel automatic payroll deductions. Both dues amounts and automatic payroll deductions are negotiated and approved by member workers. Third, unions in Pennsylvania are required by law to represent every member of the bargaining unit, including workers who do not belong to the union, fairly and without discrimination. That is why state law allows unions to conduct a portion of their regular union dues from non-members. But it's important to note that these fair share fees are restricted only to the cost of collective bargaining and administration. Fair share fees cannot be collected for political or campaign activity, and I therefore appreciate the fact that this language does not include the fair share fees. Fourth, even union members cannot be compelled to contribute to political action committees. These contributions are entirely voluntary and at the discretion of the individual union members. Fifth, workers have the right to object to the amount of the fair share fees they are charged, and they have to prove to an independent arbitrator their fair share fees are accurately calculated, and unions must pay the cost of this arbitration. Finally, and most importantly, as we approach the state budget deadline, voluntarily automatic payroll deductions do not cost the state taxpayers any money. Ending them will not save the state any money. These voluntary deductions are processed by the state at the same time other payroll deductions are processed. Because of the state's highly automated payroll processing system, the Revenue Department has already acknowledged that payroll deductions cost the state virtually nothing. Our Auditor General has estimated the cost at somewhere under $100 a year. The bottom line is this. Automatic payroll deductions are well-established, long-standing, and non-controversial way to make it easier for workers to support the benefits they receive from belonging to a union. The only reason to interfere with or protect these kind of automatic payroll deductions is to make it more complicated for workers to support their union and to support their own interests. And I think we all understand why that sounds like a good idea to a narrow group of special interests in this state and across the nation. This is the kind of bill that ALEC, the Commonwealth Foundation, Americans for Prosperity are supporting here in Pennsylvania and across the nation. House Bill 1507 and similar bills being pushed in other states are not at all concerned with the cost or wisdom of automatic payroll deductions that are directed at big banks, financial services companies, and insurance companies. These bills are only aimed at prohibiting voluntary deductions to support workplace rights for teachers, nurses, public safety workers, and others. We believe there's a fundamental unfairness to this. And we believe that our duty as state legislators is to fight fundamental unfairness in many forms, wherever we can. This is a place where unfairness is not at all necessary. And I would strongly urge that this legislation be defeated. I'm sure all the Democrats are going to vote against it. I would hope we could get some Republican votes against it, too.
Thank you, Representative Cohen. Just received an email from the AFL-CIO in opposition to the pension reform that we're looking to consider this week. It's that type of advocacy that the unions are using these dues money for, that are working against the taxpayers who want those changes. So whereas you might have somebody in your party that's in a statewide elected office that claims this doesn't cost very much, which I would dispute, but there, as came out in our hearing, there is the issue of cost avoidance. The unions should be paying to collect their own money. The taxpayers shouldn't be forced to subsidize the union's collection to use that money to work against them. It's just a matter of what's right versus what's wrong. And the taxpayers are getting the wrong end of the stick on this one. Representative Vankovich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In response to the prior speaker, the minority chairman, this is an issue of fundamental unfairness. No other group in the state of Pennsylvania is given the opportunity to use the very expensive payroll systems of the state, county, and school districts and local governments to collect money that they use for political purposes. And I would just like to boil this bill down, in my opinion, to a very simple concept. There is no disputing, not one person on this committee in our hearing that we had disputed that some of the union dues and PAC money that is collected is used for political purposes. Nobody disputed that. The fact of the matter is that the taxpayers are collecting it. Nobody disputed that. So we're sitting here in total agreement on the two fundamental purposes of this bill. Yet somehow we agree that the taxpayers' resources should not be used for political purposes when it's an elected official. But as a policy decision, we're willing to sit here and say that the same shouldn't apply for outside political groups. And we've heard a lot of fancy arguments about how perhaps the bill isn't tight enough. Perhaps insurance companies are using their premium dollars that we send them as a state government for political purposes. Well, instead of voting against this bill, instead of getting part of it right, I would offer that if you think that insurance companies or whomever else shouldn't be using taxpayer resources to collect their premiums, offer an amendment on the floor. And we can consider it as a matter of policy as to whether or not a majority vote in the House supports that concept. We've also heard that certain unions shouldn't be exempted from this. That's a policy decision. And I would encourage you that if you don't think they should, offer the amendments on the House floor. But right now, we have discussed this issue for months and sometimes years. And I believe that today is a day that we deserve to take a vote on getting taxpayers out of the business of collecting political money and take another step towards government reform here in the state of Pennsylvania. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Vankovich. Representative Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I was a kid growing up, my mother used to say something to me. She used to say, "Tell the truth and shame the devil." Her mother used to say the same thing to her. And that statement simply meant, don't lie, don't throw the rock and hide your hand. If you're going to throw the rock and take credit for throwing it. This piece of legislation, Mr. Chairman, is not about protecting anybody's paycheck. This legislation is not about taxpayers spending money to collect dues. Mr. Chairman, this legislation is clearly about union busting. It is clearly about stopping unions from having the ability to advocate and fight for the rights and the benefits of their workers. So I say, Mr. Chairman, tell the truth and shame the devil. If this is what this legislation is about, let's not give it a funky title. Let's not give it a clever name. Let's call it exactly what it is. Additionally, Mr. Chairman, I would say that this legislation singles out unions, and it doesn't single out other folks who do the same type of action. When we had the public hearing, I asked a question about insurance companies. One of the testifiers could not answer the question. The reason why the testifier could not answer the question is because the answer would have been one that would not have been conducive to the argument. Insurance companies take deductions out of paychecks, and many of them do turn around and use that to lobby and affect policy like anyone else. There have been members, not of my party, but of the other party, who have had mailers sent into their district, paid for by the same method that we're talking about here. Again, as my mother would say, tell the truth and shame the devil. If we want to talk about deductions, and we want to cover deductions that are used for political purposes to lobby, well, Mr. Chairman, then I would say that we should probably talk to Mothers Against Drunk Driving, because you can make a deduction out of your paycheck and send it to them. And I'm sure they come to Harrisburg and lobby when it comes to things that affect them. Food for the hungry. Why I love it, and I think it's a worthy cause. We may want to cover them because they do use money to come up to Harrisburg and lobby. What about the Catholic Church of Bishops and the donation and paycheck deduction that you can do for them? Because I quite honestly remember a couple pieces of legislation earlier this session that they were in my office lobbying about as well. So if we're going to talk about this, if we're going to do this, then let's do it for everybody and cover everybody. Let's not just single out one group, because when you single out one group, you're not doing what my mother told me to do, which is to tell the truth and shame the devil. I'll be voting no.
Representative Roy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is a very simple matter. It's an easy matter. I don't understand what other controversy is. I think it is always wrong to use public money to raise political campaign money. It's always wrong to use local property tax money to pay school district employees to collect political campaign money for anyone. But in this case, it's the unions are the only ones that are allowed to do it. It's always wrong when somebody pays state sales tax or they pay state personal income tax that some of their tax money goes to pay state employees to be a collection agency for a political campaign fund. It's just always wrong. I mean, we have former legislators that went to prison because they were using tax money for campaign purposes. It's very clear that political campaign money and taxpayer money are two totally unrelated pots of money. And you can't ever use tax money to advance a political campaign. So there's no controversy here at all. All this legislation says is schools have to stop being collection agencies for political campaign funds. All this says is the state has to stop being a collection agency for political campaign funds. If anybody wants to donate money to a political campaign fund, whether it's the National Rifle Association or the ASME Union or the Pro-Life Federation, anybody that wants to donate money to a political campaign fund can. But what you can't do is use state tax dollars to pay state employees, use the state computer system, the state software, the state postage, the state payroll records, and everything else for political campaign purposes. You just can't do it. And again, I don't understand what the controversy is. There's nothing in this legislation that would prevent anybody from joining a union. There's nothing in this legislation that prevents unions from charging dues. There's nothing in this legislation that prevents anybody from donating to a political campaign fund. This legislation does none of those things. All this legislation does is say our tax money shouldn't be used to pay people to do political campaign fundraising. Most political campaign funds hire people that do their fundraising. Most political campaign funds, I mean, I can't call down to payroll and say, hey, I would like, all the state workers to have an option of doing payroll deductions to my political campaign fund. That would be totally inappropriate. People can't ask that, $5 out of every paycheck goes to, Governor Corbett's political campaign reelection fund. But they can ask that $5 a week goes to the political campaign fund that's going to support Governor Corbett's opponent. And it's just not right to use tax money to fund political campaigns. And as far as the cost issue, whether it costs $1 million or $100,000 or $10 or $1 doesn't matter. You can't use state resources for political campaigns. It would be like a legislator saying, well, if some legislator wanted to mail political campaign material from their legislative office and they said, well, I'm only going to use 1 stamp a day. Since it's such a small amount of money compared to how much postage we have in our budgets, that makes it okay because it's small. Or if you had the print shop make 1 campaign sign for your reelection, what's 1 sign out of the hundreds of thousands of copies of stuff they make every week down there for our legislative offices? I mean, you can't look at it as how much the exact dollar amount is. Even if there's 1 cent of taxpayer money being used to help the state be a campaign collection agency, for the union, it's wrong. This shouldn't be controversial. If you ask people in your districts, when you pay your property tax, you want some of your money to be used for teachers and books and to build schools, but do you want some of your property tax money to be used to pay somebody to process political campaign donations for a political campaign fund? Do you want some of your tax money to be used for that? I would gather most people would probably say no. Same thing with the state taxes. So this is probably the easiest vote I've ever taken on this committee, and I would encourage everybody to vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Roy. Representative O'Brien. Representative O'Brien waves off. Thank you, Representative Roy. Representative Saccone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make a couple quick comments. I heard one comment was said that this legislation is not at all necessary. And I would say I could introduce you to hundreds, maybe 1,000 union workers that would tell you it is necessary in my district. When I'm talking to them in their homes and in their garages and in their front lawns and on their porches, there are many people who aren't satisfied with the current system. And they don't feel that they're not being they're represented in their unions, but they're afraid to speak up at a union meeting. And they don't like that this deductions are being made, and they don't like the way that they're being represented. And so this empowers workers because it forces the unions now to go face to face and collect those dues directly and be accountable to the workers on how they're using those dues. And that's intimidating to some of the unions. Now, many of the union workers in my district are for it, obviously, but there are many, many that are against it, and they're not being heard today. We're speaking as if the unions are a monolith, and they're not. Many of their members are avidly against this. So this isn't about union busting. It's about asking the unions to start advocating for their workers and be accountable for what they do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Saccone. Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see this bill as in 2 aspects. One, as an extension of Harrisburg authority in a direction that, and in a manner that shocks me. I still don't understand how Harrisburg thinks that contracts to which they are not a party of at all, in relation to an expression of workers' beliefs or a township or a school district's desire, somehow, in order for that to be correct, needs Harrisburg to tell them what they can and can't do. This has been these contracts here. There's no law that mandates that payroll or any type of deductions occur. There's no mandate from Harrisburg that says that you have to do it, except for obviously the federal aspects or things that require our Social Security or anything like that. But these things here, they're negotiated. And it blows me away to one representative talked about conversations with his mother, and I always knew one party to be supposedly the party of local control. I have no idea how this bill now sits in justification of what used to be that mantra. So I'm very confused as to how Harrisburg should tell my school district or my town what they should be negotiating on at all. My town didn't ask you to. I didn't get something from my school district telling me that there was some problem. I didn't get them saying, hey, please, Harrisburg, come sit in my contract negotiations because I can't do the job. Or please come over here and give me advice before we go to this position or that position, because clearly Harrisburg knows what it's doing. I haven't had that. I haven't had that come up. To me, this also goes into a realm of discrimination. We are asking or saying that some group of people who, I guess in one light would say, thankfully for our Commonwealth, they've decided that their interest would, that they would do our state justice by working in the public arena. And some would say that these people are somehow pariahs because they dare not work in a private sector. They took a job in the public sector. But somewhere in there, we have to craft a second set of rules for them, that we have to say to them, I'm sorry, but because you work in the public sector, we're not going to treat you the same as we would somebody in the private sector. That, to me, is discrimination based solely upon their employer. We have had people here today talk about issues that have come up from the state. They said, well, look how corruption has occurred. When we went through that 3.5-hour hearing, I did not come across one person who somehow told me that a person in a commissioner, a supervisor, a school board member had somehow broken the law and taken money that wasn't theirs, or somehow took taxpayer dollars and put it into their coffers in some way. We missed that. That didn't happen. It happens in Harrisburg. But Harrisburg has a solution to which none of my towns and none of my school districts have said that they have a problem for. But Harrisburg has a solution for it. On this bill here, if anything, one of our colleagues seemed to be focusing on the state aspect to this bill. And to be honest, to my friend who I know, who I appreciate his conversations in relation to this bill on, I do believe that there's some aspect to which some people would think that that his intent is sound. I appreciate his intent. But this bill is not a state bill. It doesn't just apply to state. It actually would work better in a logical sense if it was a state saying we're no longer going to do that. Here's how look at us as an example, localities, and if you feel the same, do it yourself. It would actually make more sense. And now we sit here today with this amendment. And at the end of it, of course, I have to comment in relation to police and fire. Listen, if you don't know why police and fire are excluded in this bill, it's because you never talked to a police or firefighter. And I could say this as somebody who spent 9 years fighting fires or being involved with my fire department. They know why this is here. They know why. Everybody in the room knows why it's here. And this is what takes it from the good intent of a friend of mine that I appreciate to the political nature of a bill that will just go down along the path of voter ID or something else where everybody goes, hey, listen, I got it. We did it for political purposes. Thank you for the time, Mr. Chairman. I'll be voting no.
Representative Knowles.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Tell the truth and shame the devil. That's good. That's good stuff. I agree with you wholeheartedly, Representative Harris. So why don't we do that? Why don't we do that? As a co-sponsor of this bill and as a very vocal advocate of this bill, I've had quite a few people contact me, including union members, including union leadership. And each and every time they do, I say, well, what's wrong with the bill? Well, what's wrong with the bill? It's an attack on Joe's six-pack. Well, what else is wrong with it? It's a union-busting bill. Mr. Chairman, that is completely ridiculous. This is common sense legislation. When I talk to constituents about it who really don't have an opinion, they say, what's the big deal? Why in God's name are we collecting union dues that's being used and being spent on political campaigns? That is ridiculous. It's unethical. It's just not right. It's just not right. All we are asking is that they assume the responsibility that should be theirs. And it doesn't cost much. I don't care if it costs $1. It's not something that we should be doing. It's not something that we should be doing. And I would say to Representative Harris, if you think there's some changes should be made, I haven't seen any amendments that you've proposed here in committee, but indeed you can propose amendments on the floor if you think, we're always open to listening and we have an ear to your voice, but let's do what's right. I quite frankly am disappointed that it has taken this long. This is a no-brainer. It's common sense, and I would urge each and every one of my colleagues to vote yes.
Thank you, Representative Knowles. Representative Gabler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. I think it's important for us to keep a focus on what the topic of discussion is. And I think that in order to get to that point, we need to recall that the definition and the difference between lobbying and candidate advocacy, because what we're talking about here with these political dollars is specifically money that is collected by taxpayers generally, or money that the collection of it is funded by taxpayers generally, and then that money that is collected goes into advocating for political candidates. Now, the problem is that the whole point of elected officials is that citizens choose, through the freedom of association, through the freedoms we enjoy in this country, citizens choose who their elected officials will be, and then those elected officials enter into the policymaking process. When you have a situation where taxpayers, regardless of their ideology, are forced to fund something that then may be used against that very ideology that they themselves as individuals have the freedom to exercise, you have the government choosing itself rather than having citizens choose their government. That's why it's a question of right versus wrong. It's a question of right versus wrong because individuals have the right under the freedom of association in this country to choose who they're going to support and how they're going to support them. To go and intermix public financing into the realm of how candidates become elected officials, it's mixing those two in such a way where it undermines the very freedoms that our society is built upon. So for that reason, I think it is important for us to, if you notice, you got some very simple arguments being made that are very accessible, and then you've got some folks that are trying to say that this issue is really, really complicated. This issue is not really, really complicated. This issue is a question about should individuals choose how they participate in the political process, or should the government go about telling individuals how their money is going to be used in that process? Thank you very much.
Representative O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Representative Vitale notes that this amendment comes down today. Representative Knowles makes commentary about a lack of amendments being offered. Certainly there hasn't been time to do that. And I'm sure Representative Harris would like to offer amendments to this. So mindful of these three things, I move that this bill be tabled to a date certain of Thursday at 9 a.m.
Representative O'Brien, we've already had a motion for tabling.
No, sir, you had a motion to table. This is a motion to table to a date certain. It's in order.
It's a dilatory motion. We've already had a motion to table. It's just a motion to, you know what the vote's going to be, Representative O'Brien. I mean, have a substantive debate. It is a motion to give a member a chance to offer an amendment, sir. Representative O'Brien, I believe this is a dilatory motion and not in order.
I believe that it is in order, and I believe that it is allowed by Mason's manual, and I move that we table to a date certain of Thursday at 9 a.m.
Second. I second that motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would say there's been intervening business since the last motion, and therefore this motion is in order.
Mr. Chairman, maybe let me redefine here. Let me move to postpone as opposed to table, if that would make the chair more comfortable.
Just give me a second. Motion to postpone. Representative O'Brien? Sorry, sir? You've made a motion to postpone rather than tabling. Is there a second for Representative O'Brien's motion to postpone? We're not looking for a third. Who was the second? Daley's second. On the motion to postpone, Representative McGinnis, please call the roll.
Chair Metcalfe.
No.
Barrar. Dunbar. No. Evankovich.
No.
Everett. No. Gobler.
No.
Keller.
No.
Knowles.
No.
Krieger.
No.
Maloney. No. McGinnis, no. Roy.
No.
Zaccone.
No.
Simmons.
No.
Truitt.
No.
Chair Cohn.
Yes.
Daly.
Yes.
Flynn.
Yes.
Harris.
Yes.
McNeil.
Yes.
Miller. O'Brien.
Yes.
Schlossberg. Sims.
Yes.
Vitale.
Yes.
Chair Metcalfe, a majority answering in the negative, the motion fails.
Thank you, Representative McGinnis. With the motion made and seconded to call up the bill as amended, Representative McGinnis, if you can take the roll on House Bill 1507.
Chair Metcalfe.
Yes.
Barrar. Dunbar. Evankovich.
Yes.
Everett. Gobler.
Yes.
Keller.
Yes.
Knowles.
Yes.
Krieger.
Yes.
Maloney. McGinnis, yes. Roy.
Yes.
Zaccone.
Yes.
Simmons.
Yes.
Truitt.
Yes.
Chair Cohn.
No.
Daly.
No.
Flynn.
No.
Harris.
Absolutely not.
Neal.
Absolutely not.
Miller.
No.
O'Brien.
As part of the kabuki dance, no.
Schlossberg. Sims.
No.
Vitale.
No.
Chair Metcalfe, a majority voting in the affirmative, the motion carries.
Thank you. And House Bill 1507 as amended will be reported from the committee. I thank the members for their time. Be alert. We will be making additional announcements this week during Budget Week to consider additional legislation. Thank you for the members' time. Motion to adjourn, Representative Simmons. Seconded, Representative McGinnis. This meeting is adjourned.